Welcome to Grieving Insomniacs. I am your host, Christy Haberman. I am glad you're here. Thanks for being a part of our community. A few disclaimers before we get started. I am a licensed therapist. However, this podcast is not to be considered mental health therapy or counseling. It is for entertainment purposes only and is not associated with my counseling practice, Christy Haberman Counseling Services. Thanks for showing up. I was thinking about it being Thanksgiving, and what could I say about Thanksgiving? And then I heard this term inside my head called the dark night of the soul. And I thought, that's interesting. Maybe we should talk about the dark night of the soul. And then after I thought about the dark night of the soul, I realized for myself especially that Thanksgiving to January is the dark side of my grief. And I never really heard of the dark night of the soul before. And so I listened to my intuition. That's what it is when you get a message, when you're thinking about something, it's your intuition telling you to go do the thing that you're thinking about, to talk about the thing that you're thought about. And so I did some research for this podcast on the dark night of the soul. So the dark night of the soul was coined by John of the Cross, and it's actually a poem, and it's a poem about his relationship with God and how it's not felt all of the time. So he can sometimes feel it, but he can sometimes not. And then I did a little bit more research, and I found The Dark Night of the Soul by Gerald May. And I just took a browse through his book, and he was talking about how everyone goes through a part of life that they call the dark night of the soul. And according to Dr. May, he says that that is a struggle that brings about spiritual growth. So if you want to hear more about what Dr. May said, it's The Dark Night of the Soul. A psychiatrist explores the connection between darkness and spiritual growth. Now, I just looked at a sample. I haven't read the book myself, so I'm not going to say that it is good one way or another, but he does talk about the dark night of the soul. And then I found some information on Eckhart Tolle. And I think it's actually pronounced Eckhart Tolle. And what he says about the dark night of the soul, it's really the collapse of the perceived meaning of our lives. And when my son died, everything collapsed. Who I thought I was, who I thought I was going to be, who I thought he was going to be. I really felt like I lost my purpose in life. And at Thanksgiving time, those feelings are amplified because it's all about family at Christmas time, right? The holidays. Are you going home to your families? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? And this year, maybe because I'm in my anger phase, it's been particularly hard when people say, Happy Holidays, or what are you doing for the holidays this year? I'm struggling a bit. So I don't want to talk about what's not happening at my house for the holidays, meaning my son won't be coming home. And for me, this is the dark side of my grief. Now, I would not say, for these people that are talking about the dark night of the soul, they're talking about how this darkness has contributed to them becoming more spiritually aware and has led them closer to their faiths, whatever their faiths may be. Because Eckhart Tolle is more of a spiritual kind of guy. I'm not sure that he identifies with any particular religion, but I know a lot of people that are very spiritual look to him for their teachings. The Dr. May book was very much a Christian perspective on the dark night of the soul. So you can do your own research to figure out, are you on the dark side of the soul or are you on the dark side of the grief? In terms of these upcoming holidays. My collapse of my whole world when Christopher died was one of the most devastating experiences I've ever had in my life. And it is not one I want to repeat. On the flip side of that, I did become more spiritually aware, but I became more spiritually aware out of fear. Not because it was comforting or not because I found some solace there. It turned out that way because I desperately wanted to know where Christopher was at. I needed that connection to him on the other side. So my spirituality is very much connected to him. And will I be able to see him again? Can I connect with him now in those ways? And it was a very, very dark time. And traditionally, I've shared on this podcast before, Christmas time has never been an episode of joy and an episode of purpose. And it was never about religion at my house. Presents, or we didn't have the foods that she wanted, or we didn't have decorations. Where this other person I know, they still string popcorn and cranberries, dried cranberries for the Christmas tree, and that's what they put on the Christmas tree. So it's definitely a difference in perspective. So Christmas time has always been difficult for me. The first few years when Christopher died, I just opted out of the holidays. It just hurts so bad. It hurts to the quick of your bones. I don't know how to describe it beyond that. I distinctly remember when I first heard that Christopher died, I felt my soul tear. There are some people that will say, that's not possible. But I'm telling you, I know what I felt. I felt literally ripped in half. I don't know if that's a common experience with other grieving moms, because I've always been kind of a spiritual person, even growing up. And as I shared last week, I've always been a fantasy kind of person. And I'm aware, but very body aware, perception aware of my own perceptions, my own beliefs. So that might have contributed to it. But I was very aware that my soul tore when Christopher died. And it has not repaired itself. I know this for a fact. And I know that it won't. It won't repair itself. It's just kind of heartbreaking to think about that, but there's no way for it to do. And so Thanksgiving and Christmas has always been a difficult time. So how I coped, especially in the earlier years, I isolated. And I comforted myself by staying to myself. And I get quieter and quieter and quieter. I accidentally discovered last year that the key in this time of my life is to keep myself busy, especially on Thanksgiving. I don't know why Thanksgiving is the hardest holiday for me, but it is. And so I have to keep myself busy. And it's a struggle. So I don't know if I have any advice for you for surviving Thanksgiving. It's the dark of grief. I think for the rest of my life on Thanksgiving, I will always have a hard time. I've just accepted this. After the first year, I thought it'll be better the second year. Second year, it'll be better the third year. Third year, fourth year, fifth year. It's not getting any better. I just have learned to accept that I'll always be sad. And it's really frustrating too to have various people, but especially doctors. And if you're a doctor, this is a message for you. Being sad does not equal being depressed. It is not the same. I can be sad and not be depressed. And I don't know why it's so hard for that. So when we talk about the dark side of the soul, there's also this concept of the dark side of self. So the dark side of self is where we put all of those emotions, experience, character types that we don't want to take too close of a look at. The things that we hide from ourselves that we're ashamed of or embarrassed of. And then there's also emotions that are considered dark, like negativity, jealousy, and sadness. Sadness is one of those ones. And we live in a society right now that doesn't allow negative emotions. I believe this is what's contributing to the rise in mental health diagnoses. Years ago, maybe 30, 40 years ago, there was an acceptance of sad people. There was an acceptance of negative people. But nowadays, the expectation is that you not have those feelings and you have to be positive all of the time or you're mentally ill. And that is what we call a false belief. Very much a false belief. So me on this podcast talking about being sad and talking about being angry, some would perceive as that as being, i.e., too negative. And they wouldn't want to listen to my podcast because I'm being too negative. Well, there's too negative and there's too real. And I'm being real because I have to feel all of my emotions. If you shut down your negative emotions, you're not going to feel the positive emotions either. And there's a certain reality to losing a child. There's a certain reality to grief. And that is that we are sad. And that is okay. So my most important, I suppose, piece of advice for Thanksgiving would be to allow you to feel your full range of emotions. Now, allowing yourself to feel it doesn't mean sharing it. You acknowledge it to yourself. I can't tell you how many times I am communicating with my internal self and not communicating verbally. I acknowledge how I feel. Be like, ooh, that hurt. Ooh, that made me mad. But I don't necessarily have to speak about it. I don't necessarily have to share it. And that is the one thing that being a grieving mom will teach you how to do, is to live in isolation. I am very comfortable these days being alone. Also noticed I have habits though. And one of the worst I have is driving and talking on the phone. I need to cure that, but I still do it. But it's staying true to yourself. You're going to white knuckle it through the holidays. You just are. And it's all about comfort. Comfort yourself. What do you do to comfort yourself? Unfortunately, mine is food. And it might be due to the lack of food when I was a kid that I go to food, but I like chocolate and potato chips. That comforts me. Fuzzy blankets. I do spend a significant amount of time in disassociation. I wouldn't recommend that, but it's just a fact. It's one of those dark side of the character. And what disassociation looks like for me is reading a book so I don't have to think, watching TV so I don't have to think, is what it does for me. And it's just kind of difficult. And my mind will always be on Chris. And I look for signs for him around the holidays. I do. I also have a music playlist. For those of you that Plum is considered Christian music, but I love her music. And I swear that she's lost a child because there's a song on there, Need You Now, that's all about losing a child. She maintains she wrote it for one of her friends, but I don't think so. The way that she sings and talks about, and she'll absolutely deny, and I don't blame her for not wanting to share that with the world, but the way that she sings and the desperation in her voice makes me think that she's one of us, because we've all been on our knees at one moment in time saying, please, God, help me through this dark, dark time. And that's what she sings about. And she sings about that whole album that song is on, Need You Now. It's a fantastic album. But I listen to that song, and when it comes on, it reminds me of Christopher. And I know that he's here and he's listening. The other thing that gets kind of difficult for me during the holidays too is his daughter. that's been adopted and with another family. Before you start judging me, we didn't have any choice in that. Obviously, she had a mother, and mother got remarried and changed her name, and so she's not associated with Christopher, nor they told her. But I think about her, and there'll be pictures from Thanksgiving and her life there, and I think about what I'm missing there, and it just makes my heart break. And I thought I was the only one. Till I was watching the Long Island Medium one day at a bowling alley, and she walked up to someone, and they asked her if she had any grandchildren. She said, yeah, her son died, and the mom didn't want to have anything to do with the grandparents anymore, and she had moved on with her life, and they didn't get to see the grandchildren. And it was really heartbreaking because their grandchildren were 8, 9, and 10, whereas when Christopher died, his daughter was only 3 months old, so it's not as much of a memory as it would be if you were 7, 8, and 9, or what was it, 8, 9, and 10, something like that. Anyway, they have memories of their grandparents, and they're just not allowed to see them. It's just heartbreaking what people will do in grief. So if you're one of those people that don't see your grandchildren on the holidays because she's moved on or married someone else, or he's moved on and married someone else, my heart breaks for you, because that becomes acutely noticeable around the holidays. Because if our children were living, they would be coming to our house, and we would still have children, and we would still have grandchildren. But they're not, and that's what we miss. We miss that. And again, all I can say is acknowledging that you miss them. And sometimes I just pretend that if I think about them, and I wouldn't call it a prayer necessarily, but it might be. If I think about them and think about what I would want to tell them on Thanksgiving, I just think about it, and then I pretend that they actually get the message and it seeps into their consciousness. Because I believe love will spread. It spreads everywhere, right? There's actually research studies out there that if you talk to plants, they respond to love and care. Actually, my counseling office that I have where I work is full of plants, and I do a lot of counseling in there. And you would think that will come with their emotions, that we consider them negative emotions, but the plants don't seem to care. In fact, they're thriving. Part of me thinks that the plants are part of the healing process for the people that come into my office. They're transmuting that negative energy into good energy. But I'll do things like that when I'm missing them. Or I'll play music that has meaning for me and think about them, and it's the same thing. Pretending that they can hear it and they can feel the waves of love coming their way. I mean, there's so many ways to do this. You just need to understand that it's up to you. And that's hard. In the first few years of grief, that is hard. And that's why I call it a solitary journey too, because it's finding your way to how you can cope with this. And it's part of the reasons why I don't like the other podcasts when they say this person did this and this person did this. And I mean, that's all fine and dandy, but so many people are looking for the right path, right? And I think those people get frustrated with my podcast because they want to be told, where are the answers? Where are the answers? There are no answers. All there is finding your way. Finding what works for you. Because we all have our own life experiences that are impacting how we're viewing the grief. I do get a little suspicious, though, I had someone, I made a comment, I think it was on Facebook. Lady says, "Oh, I'm so sorry you're still hurting. I'm 3 years out and I'm good now." And I'm like, "Are you? Are you good now? And if you're good, how'd you get there?" Well, as a therapist, people are really good at compartmentalizing. They've shut it in a compartment and locked the door. But is that good? Maybe for them, they experience that as good because they're a compartment. So think of it like that. They've locked it away in a closet, never to be pulled out. And maybe this gets to the dark side of the soul and the dark side of the grief. But there's some, I'm not going to say joy. I deeply feel the connection to Christopher at the holidays when I play the music, when I get involved in these rituals that I would not give up for anything. I think part of the reason why I feel this connection to him is because I allow myself to feel the negative. Because as you feel the negative and then you feel that connection and then you feel the positive memories, it like comes full circle. I don't know how to explain it besides that. And there'll be some times, happened last year at Christmas time. Or Thanksgiving time. I was sitting there and I was cooking and I was just, mind was wandering. And then I very clearly saw an image of Christopher inside of my head going, "Hey, Mom." And it just warmed my heart. So I was like, here's this memory of him that just popped into my mind. Because he always doing that because he was a prankster, is popping in, trying to scare you. And it just warmed my heart. So if I didn't allow myself to feel those negative emotions, I would not have those experiences, value those experiences. But I'm coming to realize, because I'm a therapist, because I'm used to having people cry around me, getting mad around me, acting out around me, that I am very comfortable with emotions and my own emotions, especially after Christopher died. I don't necessarily like them, but I'm very comfortable with them. And I realize that there are a lot of people in this world that aren't comfortable with having emotions because in their families of origins, or even maybe with their significant others, the people around them aren't comfortable with emotions. And the best gift that you can give other people is allowing them to have their emotions. So maybe this is a learning curve for you also. So we're getting close to the end of the recording here. I hope you find some comfort in the words that I speak today. I will be thinking of all of you on Thanksgiving, wondering how you're doing. You can leave me a comment on Instagram. Let me know what's up, how it's going. Did it work for you to express your emotions? Was it easier for you to hide your emotions? There is no right or wrong answer. The name of the game for the holidays is survival. So you do you do what you need to survive, and don't worry what anybody else says that is the right thing to do. So I'm not going to say happy holidays. I'm just going to say I hope you have a great week. This is Christy Haberman signing off, and I'm surrounding all of you with love and light for this difficult week.